Hello YouTube, I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney. On this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answer they need from an employment attorney. We've got a question here from YouTube user in my own mind's eye. And I want to be a little upfront. You can't see this, viewer. But YouTube user in my own mind's eye seems a little agitated. This question is entirely in caps. Although I will say, no typos, and very well written. So not shitting on in my own mind's eye. I'm just saying we have an all caps question, which generally I take to mean this person is trying to emote their yelling, right? So let's read the question. Excuse me. I have a serious question. Why does it seem that most attorneys only take discrimination cases for people of color seriously? If you were born white and have been discriminated against, they don't see it as discrimination. They try to dismiss those facts. Most refuse to take a case that involves a white person. Okay, so easy answer. People of color face a lot more discrimination than white people on the basis of skin color. Right? So, like, I'm not saying that, like, people of color have the market cornered on age discrimination or disability discrimination or whatever. We have a lot of, depending where you are, there might be up to 30 protected classes now, right? So I'm not saying, like, people of color are facing all the discrimination or even that they're more prone to facing most forms of discrimination. But in terms of skin color-based discrimination, statistically speaking, I mean, they're facing, the lion's share. We'll call it 98, 99% of all skin color-based discrimination, national origin discrimination, racial discrimination. That's going to be solidly aimed at people of color. Day in, day out, endlessly, 24/7, 365. That's a reality. Now, that being said, in my own mind's eye, I do agree with you that it is possible as a Caucasian to experience anti-Caucasian discrimination. That does happen. And we have to look at a matter of degree. So now listen, as a lad, my last name was White, and so was I. And my friends who were less white or not white, or a variety of shades of the spectrum of humanity, would often advise me that while my name was Vince White, my middle name is. That hurt my feelings. It didn't, because they were right. I'm shockingly white. I'm so white that I'm pink. I don't think that's discrimination, right? And I'm not trying to poo-poo most anti-Caucasian discrimination. I just think my friends had a point. Couldn't dance. Obviously, these are just racial tropes, right? But, like, yeah, listen, I was and am a shockingly Caucasian person, right? That's not going to go away. That's just how I grew up. But it is possible to have real anti-Caucasian discrimination. If you walk into a job site and the boss says, "You effing white piece of shit, get out of here. You lazy, goddamn, no good whites, don't do the work. You work slow, you break down quick, it's no good." Which is a thing that people think, right? So, like, there's a form of discrimination that believes that this is a wild racial trope, that African Americans were bred for labor, so they hold up better under grueling physical conditions, under heat, things of this. I've seen this. Like, I've seen job sites that specifically put African Americans in super hot conditions without cooling vests, because the people staffing that job site believe that African American people are less prone to heat exhaustion and things of this nature, right? There's lots of wild racial tropes in the world. But the other side of that, and listen, that's discrimination, because putting people in a really hot environment without a cooling vest puts them at risk, makes their job conditions much worse. Like, that's discrimination against the African American population in that same job site. But let's do a thought experiment. What if that hot condition room that you're working in has hazard pay, and you would normally be making $60 an hour for the gig, but you're making $120 an hour because it's so hot, right? It's like a power plant, something like that. But the foreman says, I can't have you whites in there. Y'all fall down, and we don't want to buy you cooling vests. The African American people don't need cooling vests. We don't want you in there. You guys, we'll have to buy you cooling vests. It's going to be more expensive for us. You're not going to last. You're not going to hold up. You're going to work slow. You whites, you're not built for this. You're not good for this. You're no good. Well, now we have a discrimination claim for the African Americans who are being worked without cooling vests, who have terrible conditions. And we have a discrimination claim for the Caucasians who are missing out on an extra $60 an hour pay because they're being told that because of their skin color, they can't do the work in the hot room at the power plant. Everybody gets a claim. You get a claim. You get a claim. Everybody gets a claim, right? Like, the point where you're making decisions based on skin color, you're always the baddie. And it's going to snowball. Like, there's going to be a lot of claims, right? So, in my own mind's eye, I agree with you. Those claims can exist. Now, statistically, they are vanishingly rare. But they exist. They are also, just to be upfront with you, often worth less. Because juries, you really got to convince them that there's anti-Caucasian discrimination, because walking around in our day-to-day lives, we don't see that too often. That's pretty rare, right? It's a real special job site. How often is that really coming up, right? So your jury's going to say, I don't know. Never really heard of that. Not a ton of employers hate the whites. Just seems unlikely. So the case is a little bit higher risk. The case is lower value potentially. So you've got these cases coming up more rarely, very rarely. They're higher risk. They're lower value. I think we've established why attorneys aren't like super pumped about the anti-Caucasian discrimination claims, right? Now, if the case is good, it's good. And our firm will take those cases, right? Like, if somebody walks into a crowded room and says, hey, the color of your lily white skin bothers me, you can't work here, you're done. That's a claim. I'll fund that claim. What's the question? Like, I'm in. Let's go. On to the big show. Let's make it happen, right? Like, there's not really a reason why I think an attorney would dodge that claim, avoid bringing it for you. Also, frankly, the Supreme Court of the United States seems poised to lower the heightened burden for anti-Caucasian discrimination right now. And that's going to be very meaningful to those claims. There's as you may not know, you may or you may not, there's a heightened evidentiary burden in the case law right now for anti-Caucasian discrimination. And the conservative justices of the Supreme Court are being joined by some of the liberal, some of the progressive, however you want to call it, justices to say, hey, that might not make sense. Maybe if you're discriminating against any skin color, the evidentiary standard should be the same. Now, the counterpoint to that is like, listen, people of color and other protected classes have a lower evidentiary standard because they face a lot more discrimination, and, we wanted to protect them as protected classes. That's an argument. It's not a terrible argument. The counter argument, as we kind of touched on, is like, hey, all decision making based purely on skin color is bad decision making. All of it. Unless I guess you're like picking out an outfit to go with the skin tones of your body. In which case, That's really more of a personal thing on your part, right? So, making the evidentiary standard the same for like quote unquote reverse discrimination, which is really just anti-Caucasian discrimination or discrimination against men, depending. Does it make sense? Yeah, I think it does. Does it help your potential case in my own mind's eye? Yeah, it sounds like it certainly does. It certainly could at least. Um, does it harm the other protected classes who face so much more discrimination? No, I don't think it does, because it's not harming their ability to bring and further improve their discrimination claims. It's just saying like, hey, in the unlikely event, but statistically still relevant event, likelihood, statistically still relevant likelihood that some white person, some white male faces anti-Caucasian male discrimination, it shouldn't be harder for him to prove his claim. Not really. Why would it? You know? And that's, I think, why you're seeing on the Supreme Court this belief that some of these liberal justices are going to join in this, because when you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, that's a choice we made. That was a choice we made. That's interesting. Maybe not the best choice, right? Maybe not the best way to go about it. Why is it harder to prove your claim if you're Caucasian male? As a practical matter, it probably already is, because the jury's probably like, I don't know about this. And attorneys, as you've noted in my own mind's eye, they're also like, I don't know about this. These aren't exciting claims. They're higher risk. They're lower value. If there's a higher evidentiary standard, they're probably just not going to get brought, which is probably what you're experiencing in my own mind's eye. So, the Supreme Court making this decision, I can see it. Not mad about it. Also, I guess the last thing I'll say in my own mind's eye, we've established anti-Caucasian male discrimination. It can happen. It's rare, but it can happen. It's higher. Those claims are higher risk and lower value. They also don't necessarily fit with why a lot of attorneys got into this field, right? Like, there's a lot of attorneys who get in this field because they want to right institutional wrongs in our society. And there's not a massive trend in our society of anti-Caucasian male discrimination, right? That's probably not a thing. At least if it is, if it's out there, I haven't seen it. And I've been my whole life walking around with the stunning caucasity, such as I am, right? And listen, I've lived places where there was some anti-Caucasian discrimination. Lived in Nagasaki in Japan. There's some people who aren't so fond of the pinkies there for really good reasons, like fallout radiation that gave their children for generations horrible abnormalities because they had an atom bomb dropped on them by white people, right? So yeah, listen, I've seen people, I've interacted with people who very much did not care for the color of my skin. It's rare. Even there, it's rare. But, it can happen. But I don't think it really happens here. Not too often. I would say, again, vanishingly rare. But it can happen. And if it happens, you should have representation. I don't begrudge you that. I hope you can find counsel. Firms like ours do take those cases. They got to be egregious. They got to be, you got to be able to prove it, and it's got to be a high valuation. But, you're not wrong. If the claim is real, you should get counsel. They should not refuse to help you on the basis of the color of your skin. That would be perpetuating the same sort of discriminatory thinking that got us into these problems to begin with, right? So, anyways, in my own mind's eye, I hope this helps. I wish you luck with your claims. I hope whatever happened to you, I hope it's made right. I hope they make you whole. I hope you're able to find counsel and obtain the level of representation that you want and be made whole for what you experienced. I wish you luck. Sincerely. If this was helpful, like, subscribe, comment down below, share our channel so it can grow. Take care, everybody.